Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm Snow, and today let's continue my build series with Lutfi. He's considered to be a top-tier, extremely powerful debuffer. So in this video, let's go over his skill build as well as his skill and equipment setups. So his trait skill is called Smiling Mask, and there's a lot going on here, but we're going to take it one step at a time. So let's start with the first section first, and this is heavily impacted by star level. This first part gives him a nice attack increase, and he starts getting this at 3 stars. So it starts off at 5%, and at 5 stars, it increases to 10%. So for the next part, at the start of his turn, it locks onto 4 enemies within 6 tiles of the character. The number of targets and the range this ability has increases as you star level him up. The enemies locked onto by this ability will have their alert status removed, and additionally, it will inflict 1 random level 2 debuff, and that will last for 2 turns. The part that's inflicting the debuff gets added to his trait skill when he's 4 stars. This next line gets added at 3 stars. So when receiving Planning, which is a debuff he gets after using his skills Checkmate or Decoy, that debuff makes it so he can't use those skills, and the debuff can't be immunized or dispelled. At base star level, the Planning debuff will last for 3 turns. At 3 stars, it's reduced to 2 turns, and at 5 stars, it will only last for 1 turn. So at 5 stars, he'll be able to use those skills Checkmate or Decoy every other turn. And we'll get into those skills later on in this video. And for this last line in this first section, this gets added at 5 stars. So at the end of the turn, he'll additionally recover 1 energy. Now for the second section of his trait skill, unlike the first section, this second section isn't really affected by star level. And this section provides a lot of attack and damage increases. So he gets an attack increase of 5% for each debuff inflicted on the target before he attacks. And this can go up to 40%. So at base star level, it starts off at 20%, at 3 stars it goes up to 30%, and it reaches the maximum of 40% at 5 stars. For the next part, if he casts a support or debuff skill on the enemy, for each debuff that target has, it will inflict life loss equal to 5% of his physical attack, and that can go up to 35%, and the debuff will last for 2 turns. This effect can be triggered up to 4 times per round. At base star level, it can only go up to 15%. It increases to 25% at 3 stars, and then reaches the maximum of 35% at 5 stars. He does have other ways of stacking life loss in his skill kit, which we'll get into in a moment. He also starts with a skill called All's Fair in War, and this is a support skill that lets him gain dodge for 1 turn, and when that triggers, he teleports behind the attacker and deals 100% physical damage, and then he gains dodge again for 1 turn. This is not a bad skill, but it does have a high cost of 3. And he has a lot of really great skills in his skill tree that you'll probably use over this. But this skill is still a nice option to have available as an option. So at rank 1, he has a damage skill and a support skill. The first skill is called Extreme Edge, and this is a single target physical attack that deals 150% damage. And if the target is in an injured state, he'll get a 30% crit and crit damage increase when attacking, and this also ignores assisting cover. This is an interesting skill, and the ignore assisting cover can be very useful, but you only get those additional benefits if the target is injured. The cost is also quite high at 3. It also breaks the invincibility that you get from one of his most important skills, and we'll be discussing that in a bit. His other skill at rank 1 is called Summon Bodyguard. With this skill, he can summon a bodyguard. You can use this 2 times per battle, and only 1 can exist at a time. This is a great skill to have as an option because you get an additional character on the battlefield that provides some extra tanking, support, and sustain. The guard has block, so there's an 80% chance that he'll be attacked from the front. He also has knockback and a passive that gives assisting cover. This is a great skill to have as an option, so it is recommended to pick up this skill at rank 1. At rank 3 are 2 passive style skills. The first is called Full Victory, and this is an aura skill that increases crit rate by 20% and critical damage by 10% for all allies within 3 tiles of him. This skill gives a great increase to crit and crit damage for your team. But the other option at rank 3 is one of his most important skills. This is called Alienation, and with this passive, at the start of the turn, It locks onto 3 random enemies within 3 tiles of him, and inflicts assisting block, attack down 2, which decreases physical and magic attack by 20%, and vulnerability 3, which increases damage taken by 30%, and these debuffs will last for 2 turns. This skill synergizes extremely well with his trait skill, because it helps with stacking the debuffs on the enemies, which will increase his attack by 5% for each debuff applied. This is an extremely useful passive to have, so you want to pick up this skill at rank 3. At rank 5 are the reaction skills. The first option is called Energy Recovery, and with this reaction skill, when hit by an active attack, the damage taken is decreased by 8%. And when he's hit by an active attack, he'll additionally recover 1 energy. This skill gives a nice combination of energy recovery and damage reduction. His other option at rank 5 is called Disturbance. And with this reaction skill at the end of the turn, if no damage was dealt during that turn, it inflicts 1 random level 2 debuff and life loss equal to 40% of his physical attack on 3 random enemies within 3 tiles of him, and the debuffs will last for 2 turns. This skill synergizes extremely well with his skill kit, because he has so many skills that don't deal damage, at least not directly. The damage from the skills is primarily from debuffs, so when those skills are used, this reaction skill will proc. This includes his basic attack and 2 of his primary skills, which we'll get into as we continue to go through his skill kit, but you definitely want to pick up this skill at rank 5. At rank 7 are 2 support style skills. The first is called Moment of Crisis, and this is a leader aura skill. And for all Alacrity allies in battle, it increases their attack by 10% and defense by 20%. And when they actively attack or cast support or debuff skills, if the enemy has 3 or more debuffs, the character's attack is increased by 18%. And they gain Master Strategist, which is a buff that increases their attack by 18% outside of their turn, and the buff will last for 1 turn. This is a very nice aura skill for boosting both damage and defense. The attack boost this skill provides is massive. You inherently get 10%, and then you get an additional 18% attack when they use an attack or debuff skill. They'll also get an additional 18% attack boost when they attack outside of their turn. This is a very nice skill to pick up if you have the extra Casalias available. His other skill at rank 7 is one of his primary skills. It's called Decoy, and this is a debuff skill that gathers all enemies within 3 tiles of him to the surrounding area. It also inflicts movement down 2 and active skill block for 1 turn. He'll also gain a buff called Decoy, and this makes it so he can't be targeted by enemies, but he's still affected by AoE damage, environmental damage, and he can be locked onto, but his attack is increased by 30%. This buff lasts for 3 turns, but it's removed after an active attack. So you can maintain this buff for 3 turns if you don't use an active attack. Once you use an active attack, this is removed. And when that effect ends, he gets inflicted with Planning, which is a debuff that doesn't allow him to use Checkmate or Decoy while he has this debuff on him, and that debuff will last for 3 turns. The amount of turns this debuff lasts on him decreases as you star level him up. That reduction with this debuff is part of his trait skill. This is a great skill for clumping up enemies, so you could take them out with an AoE skill. This actually combos really well with his ultimate skill, which happens to be an AoE skill. Decoy also lets him be protected from damage. It essentially gives him a form of invincibility. It also procs his Disturbance reaction skill as well. So this is a very valuable skill, and it's considered to be one of his primary skills. So you want to make sure you pick this up at rank 7. At rank 9 are the basic attacks. The first option is called Discovered Check, and this is a single target attack that deals 100% physical damage, and it inflicts 2 random level 2 attribute debuffs, which will last for 2 turns. If the opponent triggers an attack during this skill, he'll perform a dodge and then pursuit, dealing an additional 40% physical damage, and then he'll move back 1 tile. This does seem like a great basic attack, but the major problem with this skill is it's considered an active attack, so it will disrupt and remove the invincibility he gains after using his Decoy skill. and you do want to maintain the invincibility as much as possible, especially since Decoy teleports the enemies directly next to him, and without the invincibility buff, Lutfi just becomes a sitting duck. This basic skill just doesn't synergize very well with one of his primary skills. His other option for a basic attack is called Hidden Peace, and this is considered to be a debuff skill. This steals 3 buffs from the enemy and inflicts 1 random level 2 attribute debuff and life loss equal to 80% of his physical attack, and those will last for 2 turns. This skill synergizes really well with Decoy because unlike the other basic attack, this basic attack is not considered an active attack, so the invincibility he gets from Decoy won't be removed. This basic attack also procs his reaction skill, so you'll get an additional 40% life loss on top of the 80% applied by this basic attack. So you definitely want to pick up Hidden Peace at rank 9. At rank 11, both skills are important. The first skill is called Checkmate, and this is his ultimate skill. This is a physical attack where he teleports behind the enemy and deals 100% AoE damage 4 times to random enemies within 2 tiles of the target. If attacking the same target repeatedly, the damage to the target is reduced by 50%. Before he attacks, his crit and crit damage are additionally increased by 50%. And after he attacks, he receives that debuff Planning, which makes it so he can't use his Checkmate or Decoy skills, and that will last for 3 turns. The amount of turns that debuff Planning lasts will be reduced as you star level him up. This is his ultimate skill and his primary damage dealing skill outside of his debuffs. This can also be used in combination with Decoy to group the enemies up first before using his ultimate skill. The main issue with this skill is it will break his invincibility that's provided by his Decoy skill, so it's something you'll have to keep in mind when using his ultimate skill. His other skill at rank 11 is called Game Breaking Flame, and this is a debuff skill that inflicts 2 stacks of ignition on all enemies within a 1-tile radius of the target location, and it turns the tile into a burning tile, and all effects will last for 2 turns. Ignition is a life loss debuff, so the target will lose HP equal to 25% of the sum of both his physical attack and magic attack. This is a great skill because it adds even more damage from debuffs by applying Ignition and Burning on top of his life loss debuff. The skill also doesn't deal direct damage, so it will proc that reaction skill. So this skill synergizes really well with that reaction skill, and it also doesn't break the invincibility he gets from Decoy. So it is recommended to pick up both skills at rank 11. So for his skill setup, for his basic attack you're going to have Hidden Peace, for his reaction skill you're going to have Disturbance, and for his skill slots there's a couple of different setups you can do. For this first skill setup, you're just focusing on applying as many debuffs as possible and doing damage through his debuffs. This also allows you to maintain invincibility as long as possible, which really adds to his sustainability. For the second setup, you're doing a combination of applying debuffs, clumping up the enemies together with Decoy, and then using his ultimate skill to deal damage. His ultimate skill will knock him out of invincibility, so you have to be careful about that and take that into consideration. You can also add in his leader aura buff or even his bodyguard skill instead. This would give him a bit of a supportive role while still being effective at applying debuffs. His life loss debuff does deal a lot of damage, so the top 2 setups are quite effective at contributing damage and taking out enemies. As for his equipment, he does have a special weapon called Blade of Stratagem. This gives an attack and critical damage boost, which he can easily get because of the amount of debuffs he applies through his skill kit. You can also use something like Newborn Blade. This will increase his HP, and more importantly, it gives him a physical attack increase based on his HP. This will increase the damage from his life loss debuff and overall damage. For his Trinket, one of his best options is Disaster Bottle. This lets you use an instant skill that will apply a random level 2 debuff, and at 3 stars it inflicts 2 debuffs. So this works well in combination with his trait skill because each debuff applied to the enemy will increase his attack, which again increases the life loss debuff damage as well as his overall damage when attacking. You can also use something like Hourglass, or any other trinket that increases attack. For engravings, you can use something like Sword and Wand. This is going to give you an attack and defense increase for each tile that you move. You can also use Sword and Pentacle. This also gives an attack and defense increase when in an unharmed state. This can work out quite well if you maintain his invincibility and are careful about avoiding AoE and environmental damage. Another option is Sword and Sword. This gives a 20% crit rate boost when attacking unharmed enemies. This can be very useful if you're using his ultimate skill, Checkmate, because you'll get an additional 20% crit rate on top of the 50% that skill inherently provides. And lastly, for his Whisper, a great option is Redemption of Judgment. This will dispel 2 buffs from a single random enemy within 2 tiles. But more importantly, when you unlock the special ability of this Whisper, it inflicts a debuff called Judgment, which increases the damage taken by the enemy. This also gives him another debuff to apply to the enemy, and it gives him another way to get the most out of his attack boost that he gets from his trait skill. Something like Devil can also work well, because the pop damage from the life loss debuff does take out a lot of enemies, and this would give him an attack and defense increase for each character defeated in battle. Lutfi is an extremely powerful debuffer character who deals damage mainly through his damage over time, particularly through his life loss debuff, but he can also deal a lot of direct damage by using his ultimate skill. He has special mechanics like being able to remove alert and the ability to gather enemies, which makes it easier for him and his allies to take out the enemies. The invincibility provided by his skill Decoy gives him incredible survivability. He also has a skill that lets him summon a Bodyguard for additional protection. Lutfi's trait skill is heavily impacted by star level. He really should be 3 stars or more to get access to most of his abilities. However, he's definitely a top tier, incredibly powerful debuffer who's definitely worth building if you get him. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.